it's spring, and we're at the Health Industry Advisory Council spring meeting. It's a 3-day, hour and a half each day, where we try to look at the issues that are important to everybody, hopefully. HIAC's mission, for those of you who might be new to it, is to build bridges between the academia, the students, the profession, our clients, and allied professionals that inevitably and profoundly affect our work and the communities we serve. I want to especially give a big shout out to all the HIAC firms that are supporting us and that are the foundation of this organization. It's through their generosity that programs like today and all the things we do are possible. So if you're an employee of one of these firms and you're enjoying today's program, thank your employer for this opportunity. So let's go ahead and start with just a quick brief overview of the 3 days. Today Carlos Moreno will be leading the discussion dealing with employee relations, the human relations side, the challenges they currently face, and what they're doing to attract the talent. Tomorrow, Ray will introduce Mike Woods of MedXtel to discuss the owner's side of the equation. And on Friday, I'll be introducing a friend and neighbor, Kevin Reich from IBM. He's a distinguished IBM engineer, and we'll be talking about his role in the development of artificial intelligence within that organization. So I think we've got a great 3 days lined up. I think it's going to be very interesting, a little different maybe. We're probably not going to get to see a lot of new buildings, but I think we've all sort of been there. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Carlos. Carlos is with Perkins, Eastman, San Antonio, Austin, and probably other places too. I'll let him explain that. So thank you very much, everybody. I hope you enjoy it, and I'm looking forward to learning right along with everybody else. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Bill. And it truly is an honor to be here with everyone. And everyone that is within the sound of my voice. It's been a privilege just getting to know Ray, Bill, Cynthia, everyone there at HIAC, everyone there at A&M. And it's a privilege to even be here hosting today's panel. With regard to the subject matter, as Bill indicated, HIAC has been very, very versatile and very responsive to how the reach out of programming can be to not only the profession, the professionals, but also the students. And what is the connection between the profession and the academics? Well, today's program is very much along those lines. When we take a look at HR, what are those issues that we've been dealing with? As a firm relative to Perkins Eastman, as a firm relative to HKS, we're going to hear from these two firms in response to not just COVID, but also in response to supply chain management. And the reason I bring up supply chain, just recently I met with an Aggie by the name of Stephen Donnelly. He's the director of real estate for University Health System in Bexar County, that's San Antonio. And he said that his biggest challenge is personnel. It's not building, it's not construction, it's not delivery of materials and so on. It's actually personnel. Finding the talent, trying to jump over the challenges that they have from nursing, for instance, where there's an abundance across the United States of people leaving the profession of nursing. And so when you take a look at those kind of challenges, when you take a look at the great resignation that we've all been talking about over the past several months, where are these people going? Why are they leaving? And what are we as a firm, in this case, HKS and Perkins Eastman, what are we as firms doing to uphold our side of the table to entice, to bring on new talent, to find that talent, to comb through the resumes that we receive and the processes? So with all that being said, we have three individuals that I'd like to have each of them speak very briefly about who they are and from which firm they represent. So with us on the line, we've got Melody Fahie. She comes out of New York. After that, we'll have Valerie Stark, and then we have Billy Hinton from HKS. Both Valerie and Melody, they both come from Perkins Eastman, and they both represent two separate sides of the HR division there at Perkins Eastman. So Melody, let's start with you real quickly. And if you could just speak briefly on your role at Perkins Eastman, and then Valerie, I ask that you go right after Melody.
Sure. Thank you, Carlos, and thank you for the invite. Appreciate that. So I'm the HR generalist at Perkins Eastman and the immigration specialist. I've been with Perkins Eastman for about almost 24 years, so a very long time, and I've kind of been in the onboarding space and kind of passionate with foreign populations. So anywhere from E3s, Js, student visas, H-1Bs to green cards, TNs, Os, that's kind of my space, and just excited to kind of have the creative minds, in one area, and just allow them to kind of get settled into whatever space or location they wish to be in. So that's kind of a little bit about me.
Thank you, Melody. Valerie?
Hi, thank you for having me too today. I'm Valerie Stark, and I'm very new to Perkins Eastman. I've been with Perkins Eastman for 2 months. So you've got the extremes here with Melody and I. I'm here as HR business partner to support the business teams and the employees for all the studios in the Western, Central, and Southeast Southeast regions of the US. We also have another partner who does all the international studios too, but we're not going to talk about that today. But anyway, with the 2 months I've been here, I've been working really tightly with Melody, helping onboard staff. That's not my that's not the gist of my role, but since the need is so strong at this time, that's the best thing I can do for my studios that I represent.
Very good, Valerie. Thank you. Billy, Mr. Hinton.
Yeah, thanks, Carlos. My name is Billy Hinton. I am the Chief Talent Officer at HKS. My background's a little bit different. I come from the architecture side. I actually graduated from Oklahoma State. And I always say I walked out of the door at Oklahoma State. I walked in the door at HKS. And if you don't count my 5th grade firecracker stand, it's the only place I've ever worked. Back in January, I just had my 32-year anniversary. I came in, did healthcare for a couple years, did hospitality for a couple years, did corporate for a couple years, decided I really liked hospitality work and wound up doing that for about 10 years. Back in 2001, the president of the firm at the time was Joe Buskell. He asked if I would be willing to think about moving out of the practice side and moving into what at that point we called director of production. And what that was at that point is I oversaw all the staffing and all the hiring for HKS nationwide. And so I worked with our technical resource group to figure out the best way to draw and what our drawing standards should look like. And so I did that with Joe for a couple years. When he retired, Ralph Hawkins took over. He did not like the title director of production, so we changed that to director of architecture. My job description didn't change, but my title was. And so I continued with the staffing and the hiring. When Dan Noble took over, goodness, it's probably been 10 or 11 years, he wasn't real fond of director of architecture. So that's when I became the chief talent officer. And so again, title changed, my job description didn't. And so at this point, our group has grown tremendously from what it was when I started doing this in 2001. It was me and one lady in HR, and we were it. Today, our talent team's made up of a professional development team, a talent acquisition team, and then our human relations, human resources group as well. And so I oversee all of those groups. I still oversee staffing for our architectural projects, and I'm connected on that side as well. So I'm happy to join you guys today.
Well, thank you very much. 32 years. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Well, again, my name is Carlos Moreno. I'm an associate principal with Perkins Eastman, and I'm going to be leading this discussion. And guys, what I'm going to ask is that we just actually have a conversation. I mean, this is a subject that can go in so many different directions. Yeah, we can talk about the expense and the impact that COVID has had on our firms. We can talk about the international conditions that we're dealing with even today. really it's up to us to actually guide and steer this discussion in such a way that even we as professionals, but also those on the academic side, primarily those students who also may be listening in and following, what things can we give them? What are the tools, if you will, that they can glean from any of the subjects that we bring up, and have this conversation, quite honestly, be less about my voice and really your voice. So having said that, I would like to start with Melody, because as I just indicated, the international side of things, Melody, you've obviously been heavily involved in all things international with Perkins Eastman, certainly domestically as well. In fact, you were the person that brought me on board at Perkins Eastman, and the faculties that you bring to the table, the knowledge that you have, but also the experience. What can you speak to us right now, starting with COVID? Let's start there. Over the past 2 years, what are some of the biggest challenges that Perkins Eastman, from your table, has experienced in finding that talent, bringing that talent on board, and the assistance that you've had to render to those looking to join Perkins Eastman?
Well, for me, with my role during COVID, in the midst of career fairs, and that kind of took a different turn because we were going in person, and then we had to scramble and work with schools that were deciding to do their events virtually, and then what type of platform that was gonna be crafted for students and employers to have that engagement. And so I think, coming out of the 2020 and 2021, now we're experiencing more virtual events, and it has not really been in person. I want to say very few schools are conducting in-person experiences. But for the most part, I think the technology connection is, whether it's Zoom like we're on this call, or making sure that students have the ability to download Microsoft Teams, and making sure that maybe a WebEx session is capable depending on their platform or their device. Some people don't have the luxury of a computer or a laptop and running to a library to make that one-to-one connection with employers. So I think, stepping into the career fair spaces and then moving from candidates and interviews, I think, we saw a lot of technical glitches and, things that we could improve on, I would say is, still including the virtual conversations with candidates, just with people in general, just because everyone has a different comfort level. But I think we are still missing that in-person experience, but hopefully, in a couple of months or, in the future, it'll be, looked on, differently from in person with that sort of take.
So on that note, Billy, you've been in this profession for 32 years, or really specifically with HKS for 32 years. Obviously, you've seen tremendous change happen across the landscape in relation to finding these candidates, the talent that HKS has needed, or even strategically hadn't needed at that time, but looking for even now. So with this, as I like to call, adapt and overcome measures that Melody was just referencing to relative to technology and so on, what are some of the things you've leveraged there at HKS in reaching out to the talent that you're bringing on board?
Yeah, it's a good question, Carlos. It has been an odd couple of years as far as chasing talent has gone. The technology piece has been a big thing. I mean, the good news is because we were forced to, for the better part of 2020 and 2021, everything went totally remote. A lot of folks here at HKS who had not honestly used a lot of technology in the past, because I'm sure like you guys at Perkins Eastman as well, most of our folks were traveling to meetings, and the video conference that we did was typically the one-off kind of way to do business. It was nobody's preference. When we got into 2020 and you had no choice, a lot of folks who had never used any of that kind of technology were forced to get fairly proficient at it. And so, the good news from that standpoint was a lot of folks became very familiar with Zoom, with Teams, with tools that we had not used in the past because we didn't have to. And so we were kind of forced into using that. It actually it turned into the platform that we had to use when we were going to go out and interview and chase talent as well, because most of them were in a place where they weren't able to travel. For the first time ever, most of our interviews were conducted electronically. A lot of times we were making offers to people who had not been able to physically come and see one of our offices and see the location where they were going to ultimately work. And so that was a big adjustment. You know, honestly, one of the coolest things about being in architecture is, especially if you're a student, is getting to go see what somebody's office and studio looks like and compare that against the academic environment that you've been working in. And not being able to do that with travel being severely limited, folks were having to do electronic tours and look at the website and, you know, kind of piece together, okay, here's the story we're going to tell you about our firm. And they were trying to learn as much as they could virtually about what that was going to be like. Ultimately, one of the things we've really had to think about is, especially again in 2021, you were hiring folks who are graduating from college who probably in some cases now, you know, we're fortunate with our relationship with A&M. We've had a lot of students, even beginning with year 1 or 2, actually come up at least to Dallas and get a chance to walk through the office. So a lot of year students at A&M had been in our office, but for a lot of other students, they were literally accepting a job into an office that they'd never physically been to before. And so, you know, you're going through the logistics of nobody can come in. They can't pick up their laptop computer downstairs on the first floor in the IT lab. They're going to have everything FedExed out.
Right.
You know, you mentioned something about a supply chain a while ago, just getting enough computers for people that we want to hire to come in and work on. The lead time now on equipment is just huge. And so you're having to tell our IT group, you know, I think the number of folks I'm going to hire is going to be 55, but you might order 65 just in case, and trying to get equipment and make sure that you're ready for those folks, because even if it turned into 100% remote onboarding process, you wanted them to have a good first day of work. You know, it was not the same as welcoming somebody in your front door and sitting down with HR and doing paperwork and then somebody taking them to lunch. They were opening a box on their front porch and taking a computer out and zooming into a meeting somewhere. And so that was one of the things we really felt like we had to deal with, is how do we make not only the interviewing and offer state, but the come in the door and join us as a new hire experience as good as you possibly could under those circumstances. And that's been challenging, trying to think through what that looks like from the applicant and from the new hire standpoint's been, you know, something we've really spent a lot of time doing.
What I can say, what we've done at Perkins Eastman is from the moment of connection when we're engaged with a candidate, is that I'm kind of trying my best to kind of walk them through their experience so they understand what to expect. And we're having IT connect with them prior to their start date, so they're a little bit more ready for day one. And then we're having, a quick Teams meeting, at 9 a.m. so they kind of can get their coffee, get settled, and then get connected with, their internal studios, and then get prepared for our virtual sessions, but we do miss the in-person connection, taking people out to lunch, but we do try to kind of have a virtual one-to-one connection, but it's still missing that that physical experience. But yeah, definitely. And I think the challenge with just the candidates, and becoming a new hire, they feel disconnected, because they're coming from wherever they are, and just not building relationships is so important. And I think just to have that establishment when you start, and having that handshake, and then making those overall connections is pretty crucial, especially in early stages. So what I've also started doing was having icebreaker conversations, and what we've experienced is having people, share their headshot pictures, even if it's not professional, just a quick selfie, and then just provide some fun facts. So, people can virtually be introduced, and, it takes the weight off of, oh my gosh, I'm meeting like 50 people at once on a Zoom call or a Teams meeting. So I think, having the manager, be able to kind of share with the group ahead of time of, the new hires that are coming through the door. So, when we do have any type of sessions, we do allow the candidate, which is the new hire, to kind of speak to, and say hello to the rest of the group. And most of the time it gives more of a relaxation because people are like, oh, I work there. Oh, I went to school there. And it allows more of networking, which we definitely encourage, in the firm, because it's a small world and you never know who you're going to be connecting with. So sorry, just wanted to kind of share that in case that is helpful for anyone.
No, that was actually very, very good. And I'm glad you brought up a number of things there, as well as Billy. Billy even mentioned the onboarding process and some of the challenges that have come out of even the use of technology. Not all of us have been used to that.
Yeah.
The gain of knowledge with respect to that technology has been vast. We've all learned a number of different things relative to what it can do, what it shouldn't do. Certainly it can't replace the human connection. We've all been designed, so to speak, for relationship, right? Let's talk a little bit about that, though. Relationship. When we talk about our students, when we talk about the faculty and the professionals, the profession, what are some of those hands-on opportunities that you all have encouraged? And I'll start with you, Billy, again. On this subject, because it sounds like this is something that you have touched upon when you were speaking about the students and their involvement and what they can do. What can the faculty do, for instance, in further engaging their students to the profession, making those networks happen? And I'll give you a quick anecdotal reference. I remember probably when you and I were growing up, if you will, in this profession, it came down to not really the resume to start off with. It was with who you knew. And that sometimes out leveraged even what you knew. And so today you have LinkedIn, you've got Instagram, you've got a number of other modalities out there that the students have access to that, quite frankly, I don't know half of that. But what have you been encouraging the faculty to do, since they're right there, boots on the ground with these students?
It's a great question, Carlos. There's a couple answers to that. The first one, I'll touch on the last thing you said there first, which is, the social media platforms, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all of that kind of stuff. All of the big firms actually have those kind of accounts. And, it's a great place. We love to share. I know Perkins Eastman does the same thing. As you get a big win, you want to put that out on Twitter, you want to tweet, you want to have something out on LinkedIn. I think if the faculty could encourage their folks to actually go out and whether it's and I'll have to admit, I'm not a social media guru by any means. If I need advice, I talk to my 20-year-old daughter. But, if you could encourage them, go out and find the accounts for HKS, for Perkins Eastman, for the places where they think they want to work, whether you like or you join or you follow, whatever you do, it's a great mechanism to actually get information from a company, not only on the kinds of projects they do, but honestly on what do they celebrate, what do they talk about, what do they feel like it's important to share externally. And I think it's honestly a great window into the personality of a firm. So I would encourage the faculty to do that. I'm old enough to where I think even better, every chance you guys have to invite practitioners into your classroom to come and speak, whether that's to be on a jury, just to come talk about even things like this, come talk about what's it like to go interview, have somebody come in and talk about that with your class. The more opportunities you give your students to connect with practitioners, the better. I was up in Stillwater last week. I get to be on something they call the Professional Advisory Board for Oklahoma State for the architecture school. And so we meet on campus twice a year. We did do virtual there for a couple of meetings, but we're back in person again. So I was physically in Stillwater last week. And The dean of the school is just really incredibly smart about how she does this. We've got 25 people on this committee, and we get together, and in the morning we talk and we discuss the school and the curriculum. But then at lunch, she invites all of us to go down into the gallery space, and she serves lunch to all of the students and to the people who come in from the profession, and just gives you a chance to sit down at a table. And she tells all the students ahead of time, when you come down and have lunch, don't go sit with your friends, go find somebody that's working someplace and sit down and have lunch with them, because it's the most unintimidating chance you will ever have to ask somebody questions about what it's like to work in an office, what's their office like. Introduce yourselves, tell them that you might have an interest in coming to work for them. She gives them a list of who's participating in the meetings that day. So if there's somebody in particular that works at an office they want to go talk to and be a part of, then they can literally track that person down at lunch and have a discussion. And then you're there afterwards. We get to walk through studios and talk to people. And so just the chance to actually meet the students in their environment, as opposed to me inviting them to my environment, I think in many ways puts them at great ease, because we're on their turf, we're in their school. And for the professors who are inviting people in to participate in class, it's just awesome. And when somebody invites us to come, it doesn't matter where the campus is or what the day is. If I can't come, somebody will, and we'll make the effort, because we want to be connected to you guys. Right. Carlos mentioned at the beginning, it is hard to find folks. There's not enough people walking out of architecture school today. You know, in different times in the past, some of you guys might have graduated at a time when nobody was looking. But right now, whoever graduates or looking for summer internship, everybody is looking. And so, you know, it's a great time. And so we're going to make effort to be in whatever campus or whatever classroom we're invited to. Somebody is going to be there. And we think that's just really valuable time.
And the comments you're making, thank you so much for that list, if you will, that you just run down. Let's talk about one of those things, and that is what you know is what you need to leverage. You talk about the students and you talk about the need that we have for these students. Recruitment at the end of the day is one of our biggest strategical marks for Perkins Eastman, as an example. We're constantly recruiting. And so I want to turn to Valerie in this regard. Valerie, when we're talking about the business partnership that we have with you and the work that you're bringing by virtue of your skill sets and what you're doing from an HR perspective, let's take some of those comments that Billy was just making. You know, I'll start with this, for instance, just to use it as a lead-in. Oftentimes when I'm meeting with students or even graduate students and PhDs, sometimes the profession, us professionals, if you will, can be intimidating. The fact of the matter is, I often see students selling themselves short. They know something. There is something of value, great value, that I want to know about them. And so when we start talking about the Instagram sites, as well as LinkedIn and so on, how have you been reviewing in the receiving of resumes, whether it be online or whether it be in paper, and what is it that you would recommend relative to getting out there and making yourself known?
Oh, that's a really good question. And I mean, I have a couple of thoughts when you're talking about getting yourself known. And we talked about internships and the value of internships. That is a really great way to get in the professional world and start meeting people. And as a student, start lowering that intimidation, because actually the professionals really want you. They are so excited to see you, and they're excited to grow and watch your development. That is something that the longer you're in your profession, the more you're excited about it and you want to share the opportunities and the wealth of information. So I think students should really be aware of how much we're investing in them and want to get to know them, even though there's that intimidation factor. I definitely remember it. We really want them, and really want to grow them, as I said. I think also they should know about how we use our recruitment platform, which is called Clear Company. Most businesses today use ATS, applicant tracking system. It's very, very common, but we just had a recruitment at career fairs, and we noticed lots of students wanted us, but they didn't do that extra step to put their resume on our applicant tracking system called Clear. And that is where we review resumes. We track the students or whoever is applying for jobs through the process. We look at who applied, what position. We might even see, after looking at their resume, where they might be a really good fit for. We'd move them along to somewhere else in the company. Sometimes they apply for California, but that job is in Texas.
Right.
We never know, and we leverage that consistently, and that is the biggest value to them, to know that that's how we do it. There's a lot of serendipity where we'll have time to look for applicants. We can go do the recruiting actively and look where passive candidates might be, but right now we're not. So how you talked about the other day that someone found you on LinkedIn, there's times where we can't go looking for you, but if you're on our recruitment platform, Clear Company, we're going to find you. And as in any company, we put that connection on our web page. Sometimes you have to click around to find where all the career information and all the job postings are, but that's where it's at. Everybody has it.
And on that note, with regard to me specifically, yeah, LinkedIn was a vetting process, if you will. And Melody, I want to talk a little bit about that. When you start taking a look at the protocols, when you start taking a look at what is allowed via human resources legally and what is not, when we start taking a look at the resume, when we start taking a look at the cover letter, when we start taking a look at reference letters and any other means that can actually be provided, what are today's standard protocols right now? We just got finished talking about LinkedIn, for instance, and as speaking as an architect and speaking as someone who's on the RFQ, RFP process, what's one of the first things we do? We actually go to the firm's website or the institution's website to learn more about that individual or that organization. And or if we're looking to find a teaming partner, someone specific, we look them up on LinkedIn. So those are the initial vetting steps, if you will, that we take. But from the rules of engagement, from your perspective, from what we are to do legally, what are some of those milestones that Perkins Eastman employs and deploys as we go out and about and start working with our candidates?
Sorry for the background noise.
It's okay.
So when we're looking at top talent and they're coming through a different third-party source, such as like LinkedIn, you know, I'm looking at it to ensure that every person has an application on file, just to make sure that for compliance purposes, you know, those boxes are checked. But, you know, from a different lens, and looking at a person's resume, you know, looking at it for less than 20 seconds, you know, you're trying to focus on if this person could match, you know, the role, and then pushing it off to the hiring manager or the hiring team to kind of vet it more thoroughly, in which they would kind of go through the portfolio. I'm not an architect or a designer, so I'm not going into the logistics of the portfolio. I'm just ensuring that all the T's are crossed and all the dots, you know, with the I's. But I think from an international perspective, when I'm looking at people and they're also putting in their application and they're looking to get sponsored, you know, Perkins Eastman is an international firm, so we're very proudful of, you know, our international population. So we, you know, we would be able to kind of assist with that sponsorship if that is required on our end. So, you know, I think it really depends on the knowledge of every individual of their own visa classification. And, you know, it really depends on the school if they allow that work authorization to kind of continue based on the person's maybe curriculum or whatever they're pursuing. I think, you know, just from a resume perspective, some people share, hey, I have a specialty in Revit, and that's great. And these are things that you should make sure it stands out. If there are certain softwares that a school offers, you definitely want to put that in your cover letter if that's going to be looked at a little bit more thoroughly with the hiring team. Make sure that you have anything that can speak to the role, because I think that could be a miss, even if you have the experience, but it's not kind of translated into your resume, because the resume is kind of yourself, but on paper, and however you want to delegate that and show that to the world, because such as LinkedIn, you can provide all this great content, but if it's not on your resume as well, then you may be passed up. And you don't want to do that. So just if there's a healthcare, interest, you want to speak to that on your resume, maybe somewhere on the objectives, or somewhere that an employer can kind of look at and make sure it's, oh, I'm sorry.
Hey, are you good? You're good. Well, let me take, now that you've stopped, let me take what you've just said and let me go to something very critical here that I think that I'd like to hear all of y'all speak to. We have to be our own advocate, right? Those who are actually looking for a job at HKS, at Perkins Eastman, they must be an advocate of themselves. They need to highlight what it is that we want them to see. So Melody, I'd like you to talk about the physical resume. Recently, you and I were talking about the 5-second test, if you will. If you take a look at those of us on our side of the table who are architects reviewing resumes and so on, I'll admit, yeah, there is a 5 to 10 second rule that we have in the time that we've got available to actually review resumes, and we're looking for very specific information. So in your view, Melody, what are some of the things that you would recommend people highlight, people pay attention to when they're putting their resumes together? At the same time, from a faculty standpoint, what are some of those things that the faculty can actually advocate for their students to make sure that their students are being made aware of from a portfolio standpoint, though I know you don't oversee the portfolio, but bringing to the front, hey, this is who I am, this is what I do, and so on and so forth.
I think highlighting the software skills is truly important. And some, not every, I'm still, getting accustomed to the softwares that, we're exposed to, but I think, every school offers something different and unique. And if there is a specialty, area, that should be really highlighted on the resume. And I think, Revit, AutoCAD, any kind of rendering should speak, to your portfolio to kind of show that experience, because, when you're coming in the door, the expectation could be that you have this wider knowledge of, a skill set, and you want to just be as transparent as possible, because, we don't want to kind of just jump you in without a life jacket, so if there are software skills, if there's something that you're doing, and you have you have some listings of practice areas, and practice areas consist of healthcare, or if you want to kind of get more exposed in healthcare and you want to kind of make that shine, well, what is it in healthcare that you would like to focus on? Maybe you want to do more emergency rooms, maybe you want to do something of maybe pediatrics, there could be different avenues in the design world. So, you want to make sure that that's, also elaborated, and, such as AutoCAD, I know that there's some change in Affinity. I believe that's going to be the thing now. So, there could be so many different avenues you can kind of tweak your resume to. And, right now it's not one size fits all. I've come across so many different varieties of different styles of resumes, how they're presenting. Some people are putting their pictures, that's, everyone has a different preference based on their wish, right? Everyone may have some idea of what direction they proceed, in their career, and some people don't know. So it's totally fine. And hopefully that could be vocal on your cover letter.
And so Billy, I'd like you to respond to this as well, because if I'm not mistaken, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I think on your website, when you start taking a look at opportunities for people to actually apply for, there's also a segment on your website that says, if there's nothing here that you're looking for, but there's something that you want to do, please still submit your resume. So what are some of the first things that you're looking for when you receive those resumes? If even we're not looking for anybody.
All right. That's a good question, Carlos. You know, if you would have asked me what kind of folks, if you would have asked me 20 years ago when I started doing this, what kind of folks does HKS hire? I would say architects and interior designers. Today in 2022, if you ask me what kind of folks does HKS hire, I would change my answer. And now I would say we hire smart people, because not everybody that we need to hire is an architect or an interior designer. Some of them come in and actually have oddball degrees and wind up practicing in architecture interiors, but some of them come in and do stuff we didn't even know we needed to do. You know, it's been probably 16 years ago now, but we had a summer intern who, she knew somebody, you know, to Autumn's note out here in the chat that said, who you know is critical. This was a situation where this lady was going to school at UNT up in Denton. She knew Ralph Hawkins, who at the time was the president of HKS. And so he called me and said, talk to this girl. You don't have to hire her, but I know her parents and she's smart. I just don't know what she does or where she's at. So just talk to her, but whatever you decide is okay. And so no pressure to hire her, but it got her in the door to at least talk to me. And when she came in to talk, I found out that her degree was actually not architecture and interiors. Her degree was anthropology. And so we had a great discussion. She was incredibly engaging. She didn't have a portfolio, so we didn't have anything to look at there. But we had an opportunity where she could come in, and we had things in our interiors library that needed to be taken care of that summer. And so, you know, she was going to schedule presentations by vendors and make sure the literature got in the right spot in the library. And so she came and worked for 3 months, and it was a good 3 months. And when she graduated, she called me back and said, I really love my time at HKS. I would love to work there. And I said, Angela, I would love for you to work here too. I said, honestly, your degree's in anthropology. I have no clue what you're going to do, but you're the kind of person I want to work at HKS. And so we hired her on full time. And at this point, Angela is technically assigned to our advisory group now. And she has had a lot to do with developing a lot of our protocols about work remote and what clients need to think about to work remote. And she has turned into just an amazing advisor on the workplace environment and what it looks like to have people come into a space or not come into a space and work for your firm. And we've been able to have her work on multiple projects because she looks at things differently than architects or interior designers do. Right. And so, you know, what you're looking for, sometimes you find things you didn't even know you were looking for. And so one of the things I do, I mean, I guess one of the things I would encourage the faculty here on is, and it almost sounds counterintuitive, but for the youngest folks who are actually coming in, and we love summer interns. Ultimately, probably 65 or 70% of our new graduates have been summer interns in the past. So when we go to a career fair, and we come to A&M every year, we go to ultimately about 40 different career fairs around the country. Honestly, we most of the time are looking for summer interns more than we're looking for graduating seniors, because we already know the graduating seniors we want to hire most of the time. If we find extraordinary talent who's graduating that we don't know, we want to talk to them. But the vast majority of folks are summer interns. And so one of the things that the school can really do to make their students more marketable is, I know right now there's a little bit of a debate on the academic side. We had it in Stillwater last week about the use of Rhino versus the use of Revit in design studios. I know, just talking to the guys who work here in our office, that in the early stages of design, sometimes Revit can be semi-limiting if you allow it to be, because it's not the best software to do compound complex curves in. And so a lot of folks, especially on the stadium design, for instance, in our sports group, start in Rhino. But one of the things that makes somebody most valuable as a student, if they can walk in the door for a 3-month internship and they've got at least a working knowledge of Revit, what we do, and I tell everybody I personally interview, we don't hire summer interns to make coffee or make copies. We put them on projects to work on a job with a team of architects or interior designers. If they have a working knowledge of Revit, I can put them on a project and they're going to come in for 12 weeks and they're going to have a good experience and they're going to work on a real job and they're going to do significant work. We're not going to have to invent things for them to do because they know the software. So I'm not saying they need to be Revit proficient, but a working knowledge where they can get in and ultimately by the end of the summer, they probably will be proficient, which ultimately I think has dividends for their schoolwork as well. But enough of an introduction as early as you guys can get them to know Revit, the better, because that allows us to have them walk in the door and get on a job. You know, we do use Rhino in some cases, but it's not nearly as ubiquitous as Revit. And so if somebody comes and says, all I know is Rhino, it's a little bit harder sometimes to find the right spot for them to get them into a project where they can really have a good experience. Just talking to Melody's note about resumes, I've seen a lot of folks who started to put little graphs on their resumes of, they'll list Revit, Rhino, Inkscape, Lumion. They'll go through a list of 6 or 7 project softwares, and then they'll give me a little graphic representation of how well do I know that software. And I find that incredibly helpful. The other piece of advice I would give the students is, I know there's always debate when you do your portfolio, do you go chronologically so you can show improvement as you get older, or do you put your best project first? My personal preference is I'd rather see the very best project you have first, because one of the things I like to do, because I'm an architect and not an HR person, is I'll look at that resume for 15 or 20 seconds that you guys mentioned. But there's a lot of times when I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to thumb open their portfolio electronically, and I'll spend another 2 minutes looking at portfolios just because I'm interested to see what's there. And so if they can put their best stuff up front, I might not go all the way. If they've got 40 pages worth of work, I might look at the first 5 or 10 or 15 and say, this is somebody that needs to move into the left pile on my desk as opposed to the right pile. I do look at those just as much as I look at that first initial 15 or 20 seconds of resume. I personally want to look at their portfolio.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's talk about one thing that I've been very curious about, and I would hope that everyone is, as we've all been essentially starving for talent, looking and not getting what we are in dire need of, everything from healthcare planning to architects, senior architects, junior architects, project managers, and so on. We've also found ourselves working through temp agencies. So I'll go back to you, Billy, on this, and then I want to go back to Melody on this too, because I know that she's had extensive experience in working with temp agencies. Billy, what has your experience been? And do you see the temp agency lasting into the future? Is that going to be something that we're going to be further beholden to in the search of temporary or even ultimately permanent people power behind our work?
That's a great question, Carlos. Maybe the hottest question of the day. You know, for new graduates, for summer interns, we never use a temp agency for those kind of folks, because we have, you know, just like you guys, we make the career fair circuit and we talk to students, and you know, we've got more than enough candidates at the young level that we feel like we can go find those. The deal with the staffing agency is obviously there's going to be a premium when you hire somebody, you're paying a percentage of their salary back to the search agency. So we don't want to do that for the youngest folks. We feel like we can find them on our own. But when we really start to look for incredibly unique spots, I mean, right now we're looking, for instance, for a life science leader out on the West Coast. We're looking for a hospitality practice leader out in Florida. When you get into some highly specialized strategic hires where you're really looking for a needle in a haystack and there's just not a lot of folks who fit that, we will go to a search agency and ask them to help with that. You know, to your point about starving for talent, the places where we need the help the most right now, honestly, are in our CA group and in our PA level. People who can put a building together and keep the water out, and people who can go out onto a job site and talk to a contractor. And so one of the things that we've really started to do here in the past, say 5 years in particular at HKS, is we've really developed our talent acquisition team, which when I started in this role, like I said, it was me and one lady in HR. Today, we've got 7 people in talent acquisition. 2 of those actually specialize in what we call operations, and they do most of our offer letters, and they will work with our hiring managers through negotiation phase and onboarding. But the other 5 folks spend the vast majority of their time actually sourcing talent. And so all 4 of the ladies that we have now who are senior in our talent acquisition group actually come from the agency side. They've worked on the recruiter side. And so they now work internally at HKS, and they do exactly for us internally what a search agency would do if we were paying them as a consultant on the outside. And so they do exactly the same search. They'll go through the passive candidates that Melody talked about. They're looking at LinkedIn. They're looking at profiles of folks. A lot of times they're wanting to talk to people who aren't necessarily looking. We are very careful about how we do that, though, because we do have a lot of gentlemen's agreements, as I'm sure you guys do too, that, you know, stealing from your competitors directly is not looked upon with the greatest favor. And so if they find somebody that's working at another office that looks like they'd be a great passive candidate, we're very careful about how we approach them, because we don't like people doing that to our folks either. And so if they find people who are looking, because, you know, you talk about Indeed or Monster or all those job boards, there's a lot of folks who post and they are actively looking. We can contact them directly if we source them. But if somebody's actually happily employed and working someplace, we typically won't approach them directly, because we don't want folks doing that to ours either. But we do feel like we have brought a lot of that external expertise that recruiters have externally. We brought it in-house because we feel like with the demand that we've seen in the past 5 years, it was much more economically feasible for us to have those folks come work for us directly as opposed to paying them as a consultant.
So on those same subjects, Melody, let us know what are some of the pitfalls that you've experienced in the utilization of these talent agencies, even speaking to many of the comments that Billy had just made.
It's also, you know, looking at talent differently as well, because we go to the career fairs, and the junior staff is something we don't really have to focus on or worry about, but it really goes down to the intermediate level and the senior. That's where I feel like we would really need some assistance with agencies, because trying to find, you know, the talent that we want could be hard. And I think when we, you know, connect with an agency, it's because we tried different resources, such as, our employee referrals. You know, we tried to, branch out to, and try, if we have the bandwidth to source out talent. If we, post it on, ArcConnect or, AIA, groups or, local sites. We try our best to kind of, post, and if it doesn't come and we don't see the talent that we're looking for, then, our last resort would be to go to an agency. And the challenges there is that they know that we need the talent. It really depends on the relationship with the agencies. And we've been fortunate to have partnered with a few agencies that we've been working with for, a few decades. And, it does have its challenges, because some agencies are not, they're doing the same legwork as we are, where, they're also looking at LinkedIn, and they're also looking at, the similar networks, but maybe because, they have a special outreach with, candidates that they have been in their pool, it's a closer connection that they can kind of, connect us to them. And we are careful as well, to what Billy shared. We're not going to, go to our competitors and just grab and take. We're very thoughtful and conscious of that, because again, we wouldn't want that to happen to us. But I think also, just trying to look elsewhere, on Glassdoor and trying to figure out what other, school sites as well to try to maybe expose the firm to students that maybe know of other people that maybe are senior to them, maybe alumni would go there. But from the agency perspective, I think it's really hard, especially given every agency has their percentages and the fees, and it just can kind of get a little bit overwhelming, especially if you have quantity of roles that you're trying to fill, and just trying to satisfy the role and the hiring manager could just have its challenges with just the financial portion of the piece, because that comes at a cost. And if you're looking at 30% or even 40%, that could be spent elsewhere. But there's just different avenues that we could take, and we just trying to explore other social sites could be a little bit more helpful if you have the bandwidth. And Billy, I don't know how big your HR team is. Ours is quite small. I know you said you have about 7. Is that your entire team, or is that just you said just the talent, right?
Yeah, that's just talent
Yes.
acquisition. We've got our total talent team right now is, I guess, Melody, right at about 27 to 28 people. So the 7 is just talent acquisition. Then we've got another 6 in professional development. And then the balance of that's actually in the HR piece where, that's the employee relations and all of those kind of things. So yeah, we started, your point is so good, because we hired a new director of HR. She's been here 8 years now. And within the first year she came, she said, we need to have an internal recruiting function. She came from the accounting world. She was not from the architecture side. And so she said, you guys need to have an internal recruiting group. And we said, we're not interested in that. We've never done that, needed to do that. We don't want to do that. And so about a year later, I guess maybe 2.5 years after she started, she came back and said, I still think you need an internal recruiters. And we said, you might be right. And so about 6 years ago, we hired one. And we must have, she knew him. He came from the accounting side as well, but he understood professional services. Scott came in and started our group. And we just got lucky because he proved exactly how valuable that could be to us. And so there was a lot of pushback, honestly, from the practices when he came in, because the first thought was, oh, great, another overhead position in talent. That's all we need. But what they quickly came to realize was that the benefit he brought was huge. And so the reason it's grown to 7 people today in talent acquisition is because we've gone from a firm 7 years ago that didn't know we needed this to a firm today where the professionals don't know how they could get their work done without those guys. And so they're the ones saying, do you need to hire somebody else in talent acquisition? If you need more help, please go hire them, because we want you to find our people. And so it's been an amazing turnaround for me to watch this transpire in the past 7 years, because the practice leaders have really come fully to the realization that, I mean, you mentioned this, Carlos, you can't do the work without the talent. And these are the folks who are on the front line of finding the talent, not in a reactive way, but they're proactively helping us do that. And so
Right.
I'm happy to say today, we can't live without our talent acquisition folks.
That's
a
actually
Great.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
No,
Great
please, go.
story. Great story, Billy. I appreciate everything, because the value of an HR team is sometimes lost on everybody. They look at us as overhead, but the more of us you had, the more value we can bring to a business.
Now, those are
Right.
all very excellent points. And, even kicking off from that, I want to hear from you all over the next 10 minutes or so. Let's talk about the future. We have all experienced in some way this impact of this great resignation, if you will. But if I go to some exciting things relative to our profession, speaking with Zeping and with Ray Pentecost on where HIAC is today, where it's going to go into the future, what is actually comprising our presentations and programs for this year being international, being healthcare driven, and even taking a look at healthcare as the basis or the baseline for everything that we do in architecture and planning and so on. You can get a sense from that alone how diverse that by definition means and what it looks like, and what it looks like not just to the architecture and engineering profession, but also what it looks like to everything that we walk into and experience across this globe. As exciting as that is, we've also been dealing with this great resignation and still trying to find this talent. What are your thoughts on that, Billy? As your organization, you've got 28 people that are on the HR side of things. You got 7 who are on the acquisition side of finding that talent, responding to this resignation, while at the same time you're in the midst of incredible excitement within our industry. Healthcare alone, the excitement. How have you worked with that dichotomy, if you will?
You know, it's interesting that the Great Resignation has gotten a ton of airplay, both in the media, printed media. You guys get all the same emails I do, I'm sure. So we hear a lot about that. Interestingly enough, at least from our internal metrics, we actually have not had any more than the usual number of folks voluntarily terminate over the past 2 years, including so far year to date for 2022. And so we haven't experienced an uptick in any of that. I know based on all the reading I do, a lot of places have lost just a tremendously over average number of their employees. We fortunately have not seen that. Our attrition rate is exactly what it has been over the past 7 or 8 or 9 years on average. And so we haven't seen what most people refer to as the Great Resignation. The flip side of that coin, however, is because we are so wildly busy, and I know you guys are too, right now is a great time to be an architect.
Yeah.
Losing anybody, even at average attrition rates, is painful because you got more work than you can possibly do, and you're looking to bring people in to do more work, not looking to replace people you had who were leaving. And so, you know, that part has been painful. I think it's interesting because I think a lot of folks over the past 2 years, especially working remotely, you know, I got an email from one of my guys in Atlanta who's getting ready to retire after 17 years with HKS. He's not honestly quite old enough to really say he's going to fully retire, but I'd sent him a note. I reached out to him when I heard that he was giving his resignation. And so I'd reached out to him, and he sent me a note today. He said, "I'm sorry it's taken me so long to get back to you, but," he said, "I really wanted you to understand." He said, "I'm not going home because of anything HKS did, anything HKS didn't do." He said, "Billy, what I want you to know is performing as a project manager on the kind of fantastic projects that we do comes with a fantastic amount of pressure as well." And he said, "Just to be bluntly honest with you, I'm tired, and I'm really looking forward to, I will miss the people terrifically in Atlanta and in HKS, but I'm ready. I need to rest. I'm tired." And you know, I think the past 2 years, a lot of folks have actually taken stock of, you know, working at home, how many hours are they doing, the situation they're in. I do believe the thing that I read about all the time, as far as folks are reexamining their priorities and their values and the things that they really want to value in their personal life. I do think that we are seeing that. I know that some of the folks who've retired or resigned from us in that average attrition number are doing that because they've reordered some of the priorities. They want to move closer to family. They want to move to, we've got one guy in Chicago, he's 55 years old. He is going to fully retire. He'd been planning on this for a while. He's made his plans, and he's going to go live in Australia for the next 6 months because him and his wife have always wanted to do that. And so, you know, I think there's probably some upside to that. I think people are really trying to figure out what's valuable to me and what's important in my life. But it does also mean that on the talent side, we're going to be looking for a long time for folks who want to come in and work. And so I think moving forward, I would tell you right now, our budgets and our projections are, we look at 2022 as probably the best year in the 83-year history of HKS. The market right now is amazing. But I will also tell you that some of the folks in my commercial mixed use practice in particular, are a little bit concerned because with the cost of material, the cost of pricing, the cost of inflation, everything is going up. They're concerned that we might be looking at an economy that can't sustain at the level of activity that we have right now. And so while we're actively looking and we're trying to bring in as much talent as we can, we're also doing that with a watchful eye on what the rest of the economy looks like to see, is that really going to start to have any kind of impact on some of our markets. I told somebody today, you know, the thing about healthcare architecture is people get sick and need to go to the hospital no matter what the economy is doing. So health is a very stable place to be, but we do that with the diversity of practice we have. We do that always trying to keep an eye on the hospitality and the commercial mixed use and the sports and the venues, because those markets aren't as stable sometimes as health has been. And so we are looking at a place where we are very optimistic about this year, and we still need to go hire a lot of folks. But we also recognize that, you know, at some point, there is potential for this to start to slow down. And we also want to be responsible, because I personally tell everybody I interview that the goal for them is just like me. I want you to come and work at HKS until you're ready to retire and go home and play golf or play tennis or paint pictures. Harwood was a painter, and so he went home and painted. But in order to do that, we need to be able to keep folks busy in a great economy and keep those same folks busy in a slower economy. And so we want to be responsible. We don't want to hire a bunch of folks that we're going to have to let go a year from now either. And so we want to be very careful about that. The last comment I would make, Carlos, from the healthcare side is just as an encouragement, especially to the faculty that teach on the healthcare side, is that the last question I ask everybody I talk to that's coming out of college in an interview is, you know, on a perfect day, you get up and you come to work at HKS, is there any particular building type you want to work on? And a lot of times students like me, I had to say, no, not really. I just want to work on buildings. I didn't know. But for a lot of the students today, there is a significant number that come out and say, I want to do healthcare work. And, you know, I keep track of that. And for the folks who come out of college and say they want to do healthcare work, I'll be honest with you, they get that right about 98% of the time. And if you check on them 5 and 10 and 15 years down the road, they're still doing healthcare work. You know, for the ones who come and say hotels or sports or office buildings, they don't get it right nearly as much. They oftentimes come and explore different avenues. But I think the reason that the healthcare group is so high is because a lot of times, honestly, the architecture is not the primary motivating reason why they get into healthcare. It's because they want to go and they want to do work that's going to have a positive impact on the communities and the places where they do work. And for them, the primary motivation is, I want to do something that makes a difference and does good for the places where I do work. And that's really cool. And so for you guys who are spending your career teaching folks who want to be healthcare architects, you need to know the vast majority of them come out and do exactly what you're teaching them to do. And they're excited about it and they can't wait to do it. And I'm really happy to get to talk to you guys on the healthcare end of A&M, because we do a lot of hiring out of there. And I just want you to know how much we appreciate the work that you do. And you need to take great pride in the students you produce, because most of them come and they're still doing healthcare work a long time after they walk out of the door at College Station.
That's a great word of advocacy. I really do appreciate that encouragement and the enthusiasm that comes behind it. And you're so right with regard to even those comments you made about this great resignation. And certainly, please, it's not lost on me that we're dealing with it, we're working through it. But I want to give both Valerie and Melody to also respond to this as well. What are some of the things that we've done as a result of what we've seen by way of those who have left Perkins Eastman? You know, I'll go to even the whole work-life balance subject. Where has that fallen into, okay, here's what we need to do as a firm to help support those who are facing such challenges, if you will?
Oh,
I'll leave it to both of you.
Yeah, I'll speak to that. Melody, please fill in where I miss any good information. So Perkins Eastman has a flexible program where you can work part-time remote, part-time on-site. We only have a 3-day requirement, so we really want to help folks make that transition back into the workplace easier and more comfortable for them. And we do have another program that will allow even greater flexibility if need does arise, so people can manage work and and their family life as well. We also have a lot of great programs that help staff gain licensure, but that's something just as a benefit that we know a lot of architectural firms don't have. And we think that's a great value too, that you don't have to look outside. Everything you need to gain licensure is already well documented and available to everybody. Melody, do you have anything else you want to add about the work-life balance?
I also wanted to, besides the work-life balance, I wanted to mention that we also offer like a mentoring program. Just because, as I mentioned earlier, you know, not every person has an idea of what they want to do. And sometimes we see a shift in career change, and some people go from architecture to something else. And, you know, having a person kind of speak to that and help you kind of find your path is really important. And, you know, we really want to also encourage our D&I space, since we have a committee. And, you know, I'm not saying that we have all the answers, but, you know, what the committee does is take, you know, what's happening externally and kind of brings it in and have, you know, a conversation where people have that output and, you know, can kind of steer conversations. And, you know, there's just so many different incentives that we offer. But I think with just the work-life balance, you know, I think just trying to be thoughtful on, you know, just people's situations, because not everyone has the same home life, you know, as we think, right? So just trying to speak to that, and we understand that it's a great need right now for, you know, and people are leaving, and we're trying to compensate that with other areas. And just we're going to be going into summer hours, right? And I can't wait for that. That's going to be in a couple of weeks, you know, and we try to kind of offset that so people have an earlier start to the weekend. And, you know, you're working a little longer, but then, you know, you have that longer weekend to kind of be, you know, relax and, you know, kind of have a mental break. And, you know, it's just so many avenues we can kind of spin this. But yeah, work-life balance is definitely up there. And, you know, we have a great benefits team that, you know, is really focused on wellness. And, you know, we try to encourage, you know, remote, I think it was yoga, like, you know, to get people involved and people to kind of be connected to some degree, even if it was remote. You know, we offered rallies and, you know, like, you know, challenges, just so we can kind of keep the connection and the engagement. But, you know, trying to balance life and work I think will always be a challenge. And, you know, especially given if remote stays permanently.
Mm-hmm.
You know, don't know if that's gonna, you know, ever come back to 5 days. We'll see what that, you know, looks like in months ahead.
I think we're all working through
Mm-hmm.
those areas to be sure. I know that we're up against now the Q&A portion of our time together. I want to thank you three for being so open and discussing these elements with me, but also amongst yourselves as well. And certainly other questions have come across the ticker here on the chat. I do want to state too, real quickly before we engage the Q&A, COVID in and of itself actually introduced our firms to many different things that we probably weren't even expecting. And I think that the ability to even work hybrid was kind of a Pandora's box. And I think that in a good way, it has allowed us to see, all right, here's what the lives that we have within our organizations, here's what they really are. Here are the issues that they're dealing with on a daily basis, weekly basis, annual basis, what have you. Families are involved, individuals are involved, their health is involved. So many things that we were not aware of until we actually saw this hybrid mechanism come into play into our organizations. And I think it's been a very healthy thing to use the term. And I'm glad that we're having this discussion, and I think it warrants even further diving into as well. So I'll leave it at that as we go into this Q&A. Cynthia, I don't know if you're seeing any other questions coming across, but I will run into one question that I see right now. And this is from Bill. Are firms allowing senior employees to take sabbaticals to recharge? I'll leave that to any one of you three to jump in on.
Yeah, if we have folks that want to do that, Carlos, we allow them to do that. Quite honestly, that doesn't happen very often. Most of them, you guys know how overlapping projects work. One project ends and you've still got 2 or 3 that are going. Most of our most senior folks are reluctant to turn a project loose somewhere in the middle of a phase or even towards the end because of their relationships with clients and everybody else. But if they can work that into some kind of time frame that they feel makes sense, we're open to that. Honestly, the thing I'm most excited about right now that we're talking about as far as some of our most senior folks, I told somebody the other day that, you know, I walked in the door at HKS. I was fortunate to find mentors who could help me, and I went and approached them and they were willing to help me. I've been here long enough to where my mentors became my friends, and now my friends are actually starting to retire. I've been here so long. But one of the things I'm really starting to think about and pushing with some of our folks, I've got a handful of really important folks who are going to retire at HKS in the next 6 months. And what I've talked to them about is instead of fully retiring, maybe potentially talking about things that we could find for them to come back in and do. And so maybe they come in and work 20 hours a week for 3 months out of the year. And we pick 3 months that works for them. You know, we've got some folks who've gone to say, hey, I'm going to retire. How about I do 20 hours a week, and they do that. That's not really retirement to me. But if we could take those 20 hours and group them into a quarter and say, hey, we would love to have you half your time for a week for 3 months. You can be retired for 9 months, but spend 3 months and come back in and let's teach a class on medical planning, or let's have you come in and work with a project that's going to need help doing their MEP coordination. Because then you can be retired for 9 months, but then I'm not losing. I mean, honestly, in the next 6 months, I'm going to lose, you know, somewhere in the neighborhood of 150 years of HKS experience is going to walk out the door. If I could keep those folks for 20 hours a week for 3 months out of the year, that would be such a gigantic win for the young people at HKS. And so to me, that's not necessarily Bill, that's not necessarily a sabbatical, but I do think it's a way to keep senior folks engaged with the way they can come in and really be productive and help the company. And at the same time, take advantage of being retired and go out and do things they want to do at the same time. So I'm pushing that internally with some folks right now. I'm really hopeful that the first pass has been very positive because folks can say, you know what, I can give you January to March, or I can give you June to August. It's going to be too hot to be outside anyway. And so I'm excited about the potential of how I think this could play out for us.
Like that. Valerie, Melody?
Oh, yeah. Perkins Eastman does have a sabbatical program. And for staff with 3 years, it's a month. And for senior staff, it's I think it's up to 3 months. But Melody can probably explain more how it's used and if it's used much, given what Billy said. I know how like employees, professional employees really hate to leave work. They love their job or they wouldn't be doing it. So Melody, what do you have to say?
Yeah, I think when people decide to kind of shift gears a bit, we do see people still connected to some degree as far as when they decide mentally that they're going to be in a more relaxed mode, they still tend to kind of continue to work. And I think as what Billy shared is, you know, even keeping them a few hours a week is really helpful to the organization. And I think as, you know, as we move forward in this remote setting, regardless of what the outcome is going to be, I think just, you know, keeping staff that has the knowledge and trying to have it, you know, passed down is truly important to, you know, just the practice itself. You know, we also have people who, you know, who take maybe a longer leave because they have to go out of the country, you know, for certain reasons. And, you know, it could be spent multiple ways, but I think it's, you know, important just to make sure that we retain the knowledge to kind of pass it down to, you know, current staff or, and hopefully the students who are on the call, you know, try to reach out to, you know, anyone that you know that's maybe in the industry and try to absorb as much knowledge as you possibly can and get a sense of why a person has been in the field for so long. and maybe that can give you a different type of exposure. But yes, sabbaticals can, can be very helpful to an organization, especially retaining that knowledge.
I think it's a fascinating subject in and of itself, because you all can see the same chat boxes that I'm looking at right now, and Autumn makes a great comment here with regard to the gray beards. I mean, when you're looking at the former flag officers who come back and they mentor and mold the future, Bill and I talk about the very same thing. I mean, I can recall conversations Bill and I have had with regard to the losing of all of this intellectual knowledge, all of this institutional knowledge of how things come together, how things are designed, how things once were done by hand. And there's a great facet of these elements that are being lost. And so the continuation or that mentoring, that really does need to be done. And we need to do all that we can to leverage and harness that for years to come. And that's where my heart is, to be quite certain. But I want to go back to also another comment that Autumn was making too. I want to make sure that we answered it full well. And that was with regard to the slowing down, the appreciating of life. We talk about stress reduction. Billy, you were talking about that one cohort of yours from Atlanta leaving because of that stress. So as a response to the stress component all by itself, I mean, what were the other takeaways, or one other single takeaway from that conversation that you then met with your team back at HKS and said, we've got to figure out, if not the solution, at least a way to get to multiple solutions for all of us who are different on that chain of diversity and stress?
Yeah, Valerie's answer a second ago made me laugh, because she's exactly right. People who do architecture tend to love what they do. And quite honestly, one of the things we do at HKS is, I know a lot of firms do this, I'm sure, we cap our vacation time at 200 hours. You can't accrue more than 200. And so our talent team keeps an eye on people's vacation accruals, not to see if they're actually using them, but to see if they're actually not using them. Because honestly, especially in my gray beards, and Autumn makes me laugh too. My beard's gray. I'm not ready to retire yet, but my beard's gray because all these other folks want to retire. And so we actually spend time looking for folks who need to take a break that maybe don't know that they're ready to take a break. And so, I tell everybody, I mentioned this to you, we want you to come spend your career here. And that means that we're not going to try and burn you out in the first 3 or 4 years you're out of school, or after you've come to HKS. I need you to be here for 35 or 40 years. So you have to be smart about how you approach your work. And so we spend as much time saying, hey, you're getting ready to start losing vacation time. That's a bad thing. You need to take some time off. And if you need somebody to help you figure out how to make sure your job's going to get done while you're not here, then we'll do that. And so, sometimes I say staffing is both an art and science. The science is looking at all the numbers. The art is figuring out who's ready to need to go take a break, even if they're not sure they need to do that. And so I'm a big fan of what I call management by wandering around. I try and talk to everybody under the sun, both here in Dallas and, today we can do it technologically with people in other offices, because I want to get a sense of those folks. We don't want them to get to the place where they're just so tired they're ready to go home. We want to try and help take care of them. And so we really encourage folks, take your time off, take your vacation, take your holidays, don't work through that kind of stuff. I had a great piece of advice a long time ago. A guy told me, he came in and I was working on July the 3rd and I was in the office at midnight, and he just got back from a trip. And so the next day was 4th of July holiday. And he said, what are you going to do tomorrow? And I said, I don't know, I'll probably be here. And he said, Billy, if you work tomorrow on a holiday, you could set up an expectation that everybody figures you're going to do that forever. And you could work every holiday for the rest of your career, and you will still have work to do on the 5th of July. And you need to take your holiday and go home and play. And that was great advice. And I give that advice all the time. Take your vacation, take your time off, go spend time with your family, go have fun. When you come back, you'll be in a better place to do what we're going to do for the other, 49 or 50 weeks a year. Go take care of yourself. And I think it's really important for people to hear the leaders of their firm say that.
When we're at the last days of our lives, we're not going to be saying, gosh, I wish I spent more time at the office. Right? So
I just love the expression on Autumn's face. I don't know if you guys are seeing this, but the giant smile and the vigorous nodding of her head was very good for me to see.
all right. Well, listen, thank you all so much for joining us. We're just at the last minute and a half, if you will. And I know that I've been instructed to give a couple of closing remarks, but before I do that, Billy, Valerie, Melody, thank you all so much for the intelligence that you've brought to this table via this screen. Here, once again, we're utilizing technology in a way that we never thought we would back in 2019, many years ago, back in 2019, right? So, but thank you so much. And please, everyone, be aware that tomorrow, April 14th at 11:30 to 1 p.m. Central, we've got the topic of architecture from the health system perspective. Our moderator is the fine man, Ray Pentecost. I'm looking forward to listening, watching, and our speaker is Michael Wood from the Ascension MedSecCell organization. And so please do join us. And again, thank you all so much. And please heed these words that we just got finished hearing with regard to how to spend your life. I think those are very great words of wisdom, and you all have a fantastic rest of your week, and we'll see you tomorrow.